I jump every time I get that notification that the meeting is being recorded.
Yeah.
Hello, welcome to Something Positive for Positive People. I'm Courtney Brain. Something Positive for Positive People is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that supports people navigating herpes stigma through essentially more holistic approaches that address the emotional impacts of stigma, utilizing primarily the teachings of yoga to support people with navigating stigma. We also take the lived experiences of people who are living with herpes, as we are on this podcast right now, and we integrate that into sex education resources and STD prevention efforts. And we train healthcare providers on stigma free communication. Uh, Upcoming things. So, May 23rd, uh, which is a Thursday, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Central Time, we are hosting our first ever virtual conference. This is where we will be presenting the 2023 and 2024 herpes stigma data. This includes information about what treatment options people are using for their herpes outbreaks, along with how their outbreaks are. It talks about their dating life and if they've passed herpes on to other partners. So there's a lot of useful data here. The main theme of the conference is that sexual health is mental health, and we will be providing a data analysis of that information, and we'll have a couple of guest speakers who are going to expand on the topic of herpes stigma. If you are a sex therapist, a mental health professional, sex educator, public health professional, nurse, or if you conduct any STI testing, you should be there. I want to shout out our sponsor, the American Sexual Health Association, for sponsoring the conference, helping us with getting a lot of the groundwork taken care of to get this thing going. We've gotten ticket sales already. The price is going to go up after February. So please check out spfpp.org/conferences, and you will see the early bird pricing on the site. Actually, if you go to the homepage right now, like that's right there. So it'll be in your face. Um, Check out the events tab on the website, and you'll see more upcoming events, virtual and in person, kind of like this one. In June, I think it's June 5th, we're currently planning an in person panel discussion on herpes, disclosing the stigma in healthcare. And this will be an in-person thing that people can attend. This will be on a Wednesday evening. So the more people we can get registered beforehand, I can get more details about like exactly where, how much space we'll need, what refreshments will be provided, etc. All right. So that's it. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the monthly newsletter that has all of these updates that are about to come up listed. So, without making this podcast episode what's going on at Something Positive for Positive People, I want to let our guest today introduce herself. Carly, just introduce yourself briefly, just like what you would like people to know, maybe where you are, some of your hobbies, what you like to do, age, if you want to add that, whatever you want to share.
Okay, thank you. First, I just want to say thank you for having me and having this platform to speak and share our stories because I do think it is important to put faces to herpes. My name is Carly. I am 29 from Seattle, Washington. Um, yeah, one of my main hobby is traveling. I call it it's half my identity, but that's my biggest hobby. And then also being a herpes advocate is a newfound passion for me. So those are kind of the two big things about me right now, at least.
Yeah, I saw on your Instagram that you do a lot of traveling. You're about to go see gorillas. Is that right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
I just booked the tickets to Uganda last night. So I turned 30 in March. And so that is my birthday gift to myself.
amazing. Well, happy early birthday.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for coming here and celebrating, I guess, a little bit of that with us. Now, you mentioned some herpes advocacy, and I'm
Mhm.
curious to know, like, what started you in wanting to go into that?
Yeah, so just a little bit of background of how I even got herpes. I my whole life I kind of considered myself proactive with sexual health. I did everything they tell you you're supposed to do. So I would get regularly tested, use condoms, talk to my partners, and when I would go get tested, I'd say, test me for everything. And my doctor is like, okay. And then I would see the negative results and call it good. So, kind of a shock last June when I get a random bump down there and then go to urgent care and they swab it and it tests positive for HSV2 for genital herpes. And it just like rocked my world because I didn't understand how this could happen. My boyfriend at the time tested negative, and so I went through all of my STI, STD panels for the past 10 plus years, and not once did they ever test me for herpes. And not once did they ever tell me that it was not included. And so it kind of just rocked my world. And at the time, I had a boyfriend who was supportive. And so I didn't really process having herpes because I do think one of the biggest concerns when we first get diagnosed is my life's over. No one's going to love me. No, I'm never going to be with anyone. No one's going to want to touch me. And at the time I had a boyfriend who was like, it's fine. Like we're going to go through way bigger things. And so I didn't really take any time to process it because I had someone, so I was like, okay, this is great. So then my second blindsided is when I got broken up with 3 months later. And at that time, it was then now I had to process a devastating breakup and process having herpes at the same time and finally go through those feelings. And it was like the lowest point of my life. I had never had suicidal thoughts before that time, and I just was in such a negative, dark place. And I remember in one of my breakdown moments, I remember kind of having this like epiphany or I don't know, like spiritual moment, I guess, of just like I have a purpose in this. Like I remember hearing these words like you have work to do. And I knew it was around advocacy because I'd kind of been looking at it a little bit, but didn't care enough because I had a boyfriend. And so then I just kind of poured everything into advocacy on all ends. And it really has helped me heal a lot. And just like putting, I didn't want herpes to just happen to me. I didn't want to just let it like I have herpes and let that be the end. I wanted to use it to make an impact and do something good with this unfortunate diagnosis that I got.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. How long ago were you diagnosed again?
So June of last year, so only like 7-ish months ago.
Okay. What did your advocacy look like when you went into it?
Um, Initially, so I found a different organization, the Herpes Cure Advocacy Group, who they focus more on the scientific medical advocacy of it. And so initially it just started with sending emails to like the NIH and the CDC and the FDA. And then as it evolved, and I guess I'll back up a little bit. One thing that really helped me with the advocacy was telling my support system that I have herpes. So I didn't tell anyone initially. My boyfriend knew and like a coworker knew. And then once I got broken up with, I just told my friends, I told my family, I told my coworkers, and it was one of the most freeing things I ever could have done for myself because nothing changed. And it was such an aha moment of like, oh, like these people still love me. None of them are judging me. None of them are afraid to touch me. And they just like covered me in like love and support. And I think that is what helped me even further the advocacy. So then I decided I'm just going to go public about it. And I created a TikTok for it. And so it's kind of evolved in my thought process with advocacy is any opportunity that comes up, I'm going to take it and like this opportunity here. And I think advocacy has to come from all sides. Like we have to have the mental health aspect and the destigmatization and education and awareness, but we also should be advocating the scientific community. Like, why don't we have better treatment after 40 years? So it's kind of evolved and it keeps evolving. And I just want to do anything and everything that I can to know that I am doing my part in changing herpes stigma.
Yeah, and you and I met on Reddit, right?
Yes, yes.
And so what did your advocacy on Reddit look like? Was it just responding to posts that people make or what?
Yeah, so it definitely is responding to posts, because one thing I learned, a lot of people just don't know. They don't know much about herpes, but then they also don't know about what is going on in the science community regarding vaccines and better treatments and cures. And so a lot of it is that, but then I also make posts encouraging other people to advocate because I also think there is a lot of ways you can advocate, whether it's publicly, anonymously, you know, social media wise, fundraising. There's so many ways you can go about advocacy. And so sometimes I share my story of advocacy. Like I met with one of my state senators' health policy advisors, asking for a meeting and talking about herpes and like why, we should have more policy around it and, trying to show the importance of taking herpes seriously. And so I shared that in the Reddit communities of just like, it only took 30 minutes out of my day, you know, and telling a random person I'm never going to meet that I have herpes and sharing my story. I don't really consider that coming out because, no one in my life will know that happened unless I tell them. And so, yeah, I just like encourage people and then just try to educate also on Reddit.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. It's amazing
Mhm.
that we see so many different ways for people to get involved because
Mhm.
sure, as you might have experienced upon your diagnosis, that you didn't really see ways that were comfortable for you to get involved, especially so newly into your diagnosis. It
Mhm.
for you to have the urge to provide support to other people, that healing others is also
Yeah,
healing us, right?
absolutely. Mhm.
When people hear the word advocate, I think they believe that they have to put their face out there and they gotta
Yep.
go out and knock on doors and post that they have herpes. No,
Right.
advocacy can look like just being supportive in the communities that exist.
Mhm.
There's much advocacy going on and support that's happening that
Yeah.
we will never hear about, that we'll never come across. But people who are behind that advocacy are extremely passionate and purpose driven behind that. So
Right.
anybody can advocate without being
Mhm.
an advocate, so to
Right.
speak.
Absolute, and I think, like, I see many even, like, anonymous social media accounts pop up where they don't have it doesn't show a face, it doesn't say a name other than, like, herpes something, and then they just share information or they comment on other people's posts educating, and, that's a small way, but it's an impactful way. I think any amount of advocacy can be hugely impactful, and it only takes a couple minutes out of your day if you want it to.
Right. And there's so many ways to go about it. And with something positive for positive people, I think one thing that we do is we curate the stories of people, and each
Mhm.
podcast guest has done their own individual contribution to the advocacy that's coming through here because now
Mhm.
we have podcast episodes that we have representation for what it looks like on the other side of a herpes diagnosis when a person's diagnosed, they don't
Right.
know what that looks like. So it
Mhm.
just minimizing the psychological effects of stigma within ourselves, we're
Yes.
able to make other things a priority that aren't
Mhm.
herpes stigma so that we can decide how we'd like to move forward. Maybe it is just not doing anything at all. Maybe your advocacy just looks like sharing your status with potential partners. Maybe it
Right.
sharing with a friend. Maybe it looks like going into the communities and just extending support. Maybe it looks like
Mhm.
educating your healthcare provider when you have a conversation with them about, what why you don't know more about herpes. Why don't more people know about this, right? So yeah, this is really good to hear that there are other ways that people can navigate. Like I even look at you being willing to show your face. So you're one of the first people that I'm interviewing who isn't already like openly known at least about
Mhm.
or having their herpes status. And your willingness to come on here and let the entire internet see your face, that is really that excites me for what's to come in the future because the more of this we get, the less herpes is attached to people and the more
Mhm.
people are attached to herpes. And what I mean by that is, you see a person, no matter what that person's accomplishments are, if you find out they have herpes, now all of a sudden you start to associate them with anyone you know or anything
Right.
you've heard about herpes, which is
Mhm.
usually not, it's usually misinformation. So by
Mhm.
this, even what we're doing is we're not just putting a voice and a face to what it means to have herpes, but we're putting personality and character and values
Mhm.
and these intangible aspects of what a human is to this virus, so that as people become diagnosed and they stumble across this podcast and they're able to see, oh, these people are putting their faces out there and
Mhm.
there are people who are talking about it. That's some of the most healing stuff that we can do, being on this edge of, and it's very provocative, right? Because
Mhm.
we run the risk of people who don't know us finding out what our herpes status is. But what people don't understand is that there's not really a risk associated with that. Have you
Mhm.
experienced any negativity, judgment, or just any poor behavior towards you since being open about your diagnosis?
Not really on it, and that was, like, one of the most shocking things and what has actually encouraged me to continue advocacy, because I really haven't experienced anything negative. On TikTok, I might get a couple comments here and there of like, "Why are we even talking about this?" I'm like, "That's exactly why, because we don't talk about it." But as I said, like, when my whole family and friends and coworkers, when they were just like, "Oh, okay," and then I educated them about it and nothing changed, like, they don't look at me differently, like, nothing, like, that was, like, such an aha of, like, "Okay," and so then moving forward, the way I saw it is, like, if anybody does have negative reactions towards it, I don't know them, so I have my core people that still support me and love me, like, I care about their opinion, and their opinion of me didn't change. So now moving forward, like, I don't really care what some random person in Oklahoma thinks of me, you know? And so that has really helped me a lot with advocacy, but I also just haven't experienced that either. Even, I am on the dating apps, not to seriously date because I'm very much not ready for that, but more so I just wanted to see, okay, what is this going to look like now? Now that I do have to disclose, like, what am I going to get matches? And so I actually put it right in my dating bio. And it has another aha, like, nothing has really changed differently. I might get a few less matches or different matches, but I get plenty of people that say, "Hey, I have herpes too." I get plenty of people that say they don't care or they have dated someone with herpes, or I get people that are just curious and wanna know more. And so, even in the dating world, I haven't really come across negative reactions.
Can I ask you a question about that? So
Yes.
I wonder if being on a dating app and putting your herpes status on your page, the
Mhm.
people who say me too, right? I
Mhm.
often wonder if they would have matched with me
Yep.
had I not had my status on there. What are your thoughts about that before I go?
I no, I know exactly what you're talking about, and I always wonder that too. But it's one of those you'll never know, right? Like, and yeah, there are a couple that I'm like, would you even mention that if I had said anything? And I'm sure most of them or a big portion of them have cold sores and haven't said anything, right? Like, sure, a lot of them don't even realize or think of that, associate that to herpes. But yeah, there's definitely been a few that start the conversation with, "Hey, I have HSV too," and then I'm like, "Okay, but would you have said that otherwise?" But for me, disclosure is such another big topic in the herpes community of how to do it, when to do it, what to say, and for me, that's just what works best because it takes away the anxiety of when do I have to do it later down the road.
Yes. So if anyone is curious about herpes disclosure, please check out podcast episode 299. How do I disclose my herpes status? That's a good one because it comes with a framework for how to have the conversation as well as
Mm.
when to have the conversation as well. Um, yeah. So I matched with someone on a dating app and told her what I do, and because the conversation has to come up
Right.
fast. And I don't think herpes was in my profile at the time, but I had to disclose if we were going to be meeting up.
Mhm.
And she disappeared. The conversation went on for a bit. I let her know what I did, and she disappeared. She disappeared for, I want to say, almost a year. And then
Wow.
I got back, I was on the app, and I guess she got back on the app, and she matched with me. I was like, "Damn, this girl looks familiar." And it turns out it was the same person. She was like, "Hey, you might not remember me, but we matched, and you like, I'm so grateful for the work that you do." She had gotten diagnosed with herpes and got off the apps, and she had to like tell partners, and she was really
Mhm.
time. And this is actually kind of a common story. This isn't the only time that something like this has happened, but she came back and she was just like, "Oh, thank you." I was like, "Oh, okay. I'm glad that worked out for you." So it sounds like you're just saying thank you. And I was just kind of
Right.
leaving it alone. She's like, "No, actually, I was interested. I just, this happened. I was overwhelmed, disconnected, stayed within."
Mhm.
And she just took time to go through whatever her healing process was.
Mhm.
So looking at that, like I still wondered, in the back of my mind, like, is this because now we both have herpes
Right,
or
you only wanna talk to me now because I have it too.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that I don't know how common that is for people to think about because maybe
Mhm.
it's something that crosses my mind because I date outside my status. What do we call this? Interstatual dating. I don't know, but
I don't know
I'll
either.
date people I'll date people who don't have herpes, and I've dated people and date people who do have herpes. So in going through the process of looking at, you know, the matches when your status is on your profile or when you reveal it later. I played around with it with
Mhm.
trying to identify what made, the most sense. And it's funny because I've matched with people who like have listened to the podcast, and some people like won't tell me right away. And I'm so glad that they did that because I think that I'll view people and the situations a little bit differently had they been,
Mhm.
"Oh yeah, I know who you are. I listen to your podcast.
Right.
Want to do this, want to hang out," because then
Yeah.
like make me like feel like I'm giving you that information.
Right.
But anyway, that's a whole nother conversation. But yeah, um, with the disclosing your status on your profile, I know that there are people who are extremely paranoid about the wrong person finding out. And what I've
Mhm.
experienced is that anyone who cares is just going to swipe away from it. I
Right.
won't know. I won't receive any of that. I'll only receive curiosity or mutual uh,
Mhm.
status or shared
Yep.
interest in that.
Yep, that's kind of been my experience. I will say I do get matches where they clearly didn't read my bio first, because then I get unmatched pretty quickly. But for me, like, I don't even the biggest thing to me that I knew I wasn't, like, mentally ready with yet is to build a connection, disclose, and then get rejected after that. And so I just knew for me, I just wanted to put it out there so there was, like, I didn't have to decide when is the right time, like, how should I do it? And yeah, like I've still been rejected for things not related to herpes. So like, it doesn't
Can we
if
talk
I
about some of
someone
those?
yeah.
Yeah, like, can we talk about the other things that we're rejected for that we want to blame herpes on? What are some
Right.
of the things that you've been rejected for?
Yeah, so this person also had herpes, and we were talking, and then we started talking about what we do for work, and so I am a records clerk for a local police department. So like a glorified receptionist, I handle a lot of paperwork. But after that he unmatched me. I was like, "Okay, cool."
Wait. You're in Seattle, right?
Yeah.
So was it Seattle, Portland type of?
That
And I guess like I'm in Portland. So
yeah,
this region, like in Portland, if you have any association with cops, the general population is, "Oh, I can't date you." But
right.
I don't know if it's like from an advocacy perspective or if it's like that person probably does things that your role.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, all again, I have no idea what he thought of that because he just unmatched me immediately. But it is something that I like. I actually, this is interesting that we're talking about it. I'd rather tell someone I have herpes immediately than tell them what I do for work immediately because people are very polarized on that topic, and so I do hesitate to tell people on dating apps what I do immediately, but it's now that we're talking about it, I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting and almost comical that I'd rather just tell someone I have herpes first."
Yeah.
But
Yeah. How has you're so newly diagnosed. I'm very impressed with how soon and willing you've been to come on here and share your experience, because for some people, like, they're not at a good place to talk about it, or they think that their story is not worth telling at the point they're at. Uh,
mhm.
so where are you now, mentally, emotionally? Like, how are you feeling?
Uh, it depends on the day, honestly, and it's hard because I'm not the breakup is the worst part of it for me. Like, that is where I'm still struggling a lot. But then most of the time with herpes, I'm okay-ish, I suppose. There are days I wake up and I'm definitely like, this is still my reality. This is not a bad dream. Like, this is still, I still have herpes. Okay. But again, like, I just can't talk about advocacy enough. Like, it literally saved me, I feel. And just have like the way, I say herpes is not a death sentence, but it is a life sentence. And what am I going to do with that? Right. Like, I have this, what am I gonna do with this now? And for me, I needed to do something like bigger than myself and to like feel like I am doing something good with this diagnosis that I do not want and can't change. And so I think that, you know, as maybe kind of morbid or mic drop as that sentence is, like, it is true, right? And we need to acknowledge that. And to me, that is a big deal in and of itself, and that is why we should be advocating on all sides of it.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting that you said herpes is a life sentence, and the
Mhm.
interpretation on that, like, what I'm hearing is, no, you don't. Your days aren't numbered. Like, it's
Right.
more of a realization that your days aren't numbered, and
Mhm.
you don't know how many days you have left. But this is going to be your little companion, right? Like,
Right. Right.
it's,
Yeah. This is your life right now, and maybe one day there will be a cure, vaccine, or even better treatments, but we can't bank on that. And so that is like why I advocate, because I would love for this not to be a life sentence, but it is. And so what am I going to do with that now?
Yeah. You made me think about this. So, what would you do if you were to have cured yourself? If you're able to cure herpes, like, what would your life look like differently? What would you be doing right now instead of this podcast interview?
Well, I wouldn't be advocating if I had it. And that is an interesting point, right? Because, I think a cure is very much part of the mental aspects and the psychological. Like, I want to cure because mentally I don't want to have herpes. And that is still very much something I'm still trying to work through with, like, I guess, acceptance, as you will. Like, I accept I have herpes, but I don't want herpes. Like, I don't want this in my body. And so trying to, like, I don't know, mentally process that is still a struggle for me some days. But yeah, technically, I probably would just be, like, watching TV if I had a cure, right? I just wouldn't be like, I do think I dating would be, I don't wanna say easier because dating
I
just
was
sucks
I was waiting on you to
regardless,
say it. I knew it. I knew you were gonna say easier.
but that's not the right word. I think it would just be one less thing I have to worry about with dating,
Well,
you know?
let me ask you this though. So, in
Mhm,
challenging having
mhm,
herpes, your person is either going to be okay with you having it, or they're going to also have it, right?
right.
If you don't have herpes, that's one screening that's not there, because you got in a relationship with someone, you had herpes, and they found out
Mhm.
you had herpes. Not to say that this had anything to do with the relationship ending, but 3 months after making that discovery, the relationship ended. And was it
Mhm.
because of herpes or was it other things related? And you don't have to go into detail if you don't want to.
I mean, your guess is as good as mine, honestly. But he claims it's not, and whether or not it was like the determining factor, it played a part. There's no way it didn't play a part in the ending of that relationship. So, but I do agree, like herpes is a great tool to weed out like people that are not worth your time for sure. So
Yeah.
I get that part absolutely.
You travel a lot. So do you have any experiences with outbreaks as a result of climate changing, jet lag, anything
You
like
know,
that?
so I don't. I actually have only ever had that one outbreak that I got diagnosed with. And it's so crazy because so this is the other thing, right? I have no idea who gave it to me. No idea how long I've had it. If we are to believe the blood tests are accurate and the past few relationships I've had who have tested all negative, then I've had this for like 6+ years. But those tests could be unreliable. But what's crazy is I've never had any inkling of like a prodrome symptom or anything. And even after, you know, all the like common symptoms they say of like the sun exposure or the like I am a walking ball of stress, especially during that breakup. You would have thought I would have had an outbreak for all from all of that and nothing. I haven't had a single symptom since that initial outbreak, so I'm very fortunate for that, but it hasn't like traveling hasn't affected it at all.
That's good. That's good.
Mhm.
A lot of people jump into responding in a way that other people say they need to do or start avoiding the things that another person says to avoid. So, like hearing this podcast, you might have just opened up somebody's world and being able to travel without that
I
fear.
hope so. I
Yeah.
encourage travel. Definitely like traveling, I think, is one of the best things we can do for ourselves because you learn about other people, cultures, even just like going, I had a goal of visiting all 50 states before I turned 30, and I accomplished that goal last fall. But just learning, what life is like in Georgia versus Wisconsin versus California, right? Like it's all beneficial knowledge for us. And just, I feel like we grow as people when we travel. So I definitely encourage all the traveling.
Yeah, amazing. So with your traveling, how do you date? It seems like you travel a lot. Do you bring your dates with you or your relationship partner with you, or do you date while you travel? Like, what does dating actually look like for you?
Yeah, so I actually have never traveled with a significant other before. Um, and I will say prior to this last relationship, I was single for about 2+ years. So I, but I traveled a lot last year while I was dating that person. And we just made it work, honestly. Um, he was fine with me being gone, and I made sure I did ask initially. I was like, "I have a lot of trips planned. Is that gonna be a problem?" He's like, "No, as long as you don't expect me to go with you." I was like, "Great," because I definitely don't.
Yeah. Well, it
But
sounds like that works out. Yeah. Okay.
so yeah, it hasn't really been an issue. I don't like date like when I travel. Like I don't meet up with people when I travel into different places because stranger danger is a thing for me. But
Cool. So as we talk through, just you mentioned the suicide uh
mhm.
component, and I'd like to touch more on that. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you've never been suicidal at all before, never had those
Mm-mm.
thoughts. What were some of the thoughts that you were having, especially being in a relationship? So
Mhm.
you got diagnosed in the relationship, you didn't have these suicidal thoughts. But
Right.
when the relationship ended, that's when they began?
Yep, yep, and I remember, and I won't say I didn't have, like, like, a plan, like, I didn't do anything like that, but I very much got to the point of, what is the point? Like, what does it matter if I were to die tomorrow versus 40 years from now? Like, what's the difference? And that is I mean, I actually still have that viewpoint sometimes right now, but, right at th when he first broke up with me, I was pet sitting for someone and, like, just so overcome with emotion and depressed, and it's the farthest I've ever gotten as far as suicidal thoughts, but I was like, "I know where they have a gun." And that was just and it freaked me out that I even got to, like, that thought of, like, "Oh, if I could, I know where that gun is, like, I know what to do." And it just devastated me because I don't wanna be that person, like, I've never been that person. And it also in, like, maybe, like, a shameful way, like, am I really gonna be that upset over a guy? Like, I hated that part of it too of, like, I'm letting a person do this to me and, like, get me into such a negative headspace. And so that was kind of like the extent of the suicidal thoughts. It was more of just like, what's the point? Like, what does it matter if I am alive or not?
I appreciate you going there and sharing those thoughts with me, with us, and everybody who's going to be
Mhm,
listening. That's hard. Um,
mhm,
that's very challenging to have to deal with. And you mentioned not telling anyone when you were diagnosed, but when it got to that point, were you telling
mhm.
people more that you were devastated about the breakup, or were you telling them, I have herpes and this is devastating, or a combination of things? Like, how did you tell people around you?
It was a combination because I'm very much the kind of person like I'm gonna tell you the full story. I'm not just gonna give you bits and pieces. And I felt like to tell this the breakup, how we got to that point, I feel like I had to just talk about the hurt, like, because it was, they talk about a catalyst in relationships, and that was definitely a catalyst for us. Even though we stayed together, it definitely changed the dynamic a slightly. And so I just felt like I had to explain to everyone, or I didn't have to, I chose to explain to everyone the full story. And that did help 100%, like just having that community and connection with people. Because there were people that one friend was like, "Oh, I have HSV too, also." And another few other people were like, "Oh, I get cold sores." And so it was like, "Oh, okay, like even my close friend, like I'm not entirely alone here." I still have to process and deal with this like mentally alone, but like I do have people and like they were my lifeline. And I had a cousin, I was like texting, I was like, I'm just really depressed and sad. And later that day, she just showed up at my house with flowers and junk food and just like spent a few hours with me. Just she was like, "Oh, I was concerned, so I wanted to make sure that you were like alive." But like that's what I needed, like people to just like show up and just like smother me with love.
And these are people who have known you, who you know.
Mhm,
I tell people, when they reach out to me, I'm very safe. I'm
mhm,
open about having herpes. I have herpes. So telling me the story without that fear of judgment, I
mhm,
can still not talk to a person, and that won't hurt as much as opening up to a person that you know and then them treating them differently. And I recognize that, but also the reward that you get from
mhm.
telling a person and them not looking at you differently is
Yeah.
far greater
Mhm.
than you talking to me and me telling you, hey, I don't look at you any different than I did when I first saw the notification that you reached out to me.
Right.
There's no equal value there. So, like me being as low risk as I am to disclose
Mhm,
to relatives, friends, that the greater the risk, the greater the reward. Like you had
yep.
someone, like your cousin, show up
Mhm,
for you physically
mhm.
where any, I don't know where none of y'all live,
Right.
or I can't
Right.
do that. So we really have the potential for giving people an opportunity to show up for us in a way
Mhm.
that they know us and
Yep.
are able to show up for us in that way. It is very much validating to our identities to
Mhm,
be able to share with people who know us and can validate who we were prior to us receiving our diagnosis. And that is just the most beautiful thing that you can have, like that
mhm.
vulnerability, that connectedness with another person. Like we really need that.
It is, and I do, and that's the whole other like topic I could talk about of, as you just mentioned, the vulnerability is what creates connection, right? And like in our society, we are just conditioned to not talk about the hard stuff. Even separate from herpes, even just like talking about depression, right? Like we don't really talk about that. And I started at work, people would be like, "How are you doing?" And I just started saying like, "I'm not good. I'm not okay." Because I'm not, and I can't even fake it. I'm like crying at work. So but we're so conditioned to say, "I'm good, how are you?" Like, that creates no connection because it's not real. And so I just decided, like, I'm not gonna pretend I'm okay because I am so not okay. And so then my coworkers rallied behind me, and like, my boss would call me in and be like, "Do you need to just cry? Like, we can cry together if that's what you need." Like, just very supportive in every way, like in the way people knew how. And yeah, I think it's scary to tell people that you have herpes, and not everyone might not be supportive, and that is the risk that you have. But like as you said, the reward of people just like loving you and being like, "Okay, how are we gonna help you get through this?" Like is so beneficial and
Yeah.
so huge.
Yeah. And on the Something Positive for Positive People survey, one of the questions is, who would you least want to know your herpes status? And
Mhm.
coworkers is at this point in time at the leading in who people don't want to know. So you coming in here and saying like you're supported by your coworkers. Tell,
Yeah.
I think these people who are taking this survey have a job that they don't emotionally safe at, or that
Yeah.
just a one-off circumstance.
Right, and I will say I'm very fortunate, and I will preface, not every single one of my coworkers knows, right? But my core group of people that I work with, like, they know. And, you know, another thing that's been really helpful is a good portion of them are super supportive of my advocacy too. And so that's encouraging. Like, I have a coworker, she's like, "How's it going? Like, what have you done lately? Like, what's going on with TikTok or whatever? How's the meeting going?" And like that's been helpful because it gives me an outlet to talk about it with my community, like my support group too, rather than just like having this part of me that I feel like I have to hide from people. So that's been really helpful as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all of this with us so far. I know I have you for an hour and I added 15 minutes just in case, but I
Yeah.
want to share that you're able to plug any of your advocacy efforts, and if there's anything that you have going on right now that you're working on and that maybe you want the Something Positive for Positive People community to know about and get involved with.
Ooh. Thank you. I'm still just navigating my advocacy. As I mentioned, I do a lot of advocacy with Herpes Cure Advocacy, and they are a nonprofit with the goal of, my gosh, what's the right word verbiage? For they're advocating for better vaccines, treatments, and cures. So they're very much the medical scientific approach of advocacy, and that's really a huge part of my advocacy with meeting with the state senator or representatives. And then I do have a TikTok. It's Carly HSV Advocate. I have a small following, but that's been cool too because I don't have a large following, but people still reach out and are like, "Thank you so much," or they have questions. I'm like, that is what is so important to me, is like if I help one person, it is worth it because I don't want people to be blindsided the way I was. That was
Yeah.
so devastating.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I think that all of the combined advocacy efforts that exist and run together are all supporting one another. It's just
Mhm,
machine that the gears are turning, and the more that we're able to continue to uplift and support each other, the more progress someone can make, and someone
mhm.
can bring someone else in and be able to continue to support the ongoing efforts. What Yeah, so the TikTok is Carly HSV Advocate, and that's Carly with a K.
Yes, Carly with a K and a Y.
And a Y. All right. How else do people spell it? Like a I?
I never get people spelling it correctly. It's either I-E, E-E, I, or E-Y, or with a C. So it's Karly.
All right. I've only seen it this there's like one exception where it's two E's, but I've only seen it with a K or a C, and then it's spelled the way yours is Arly. All right.
Okay.
Cool. Is there anything else you want to leave us with before I let you go?
No, just thank you so much for having me, and I really hope this benefited somebody that listens to it. So
Absolutely, it will. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. All right, y'all, that
thank you.
concludes this episode of Something Positive for Positive People. Please like, rate, review, share, subscribe to this podcast, and go to the Something Positive for Positive People website. It's spfpp.org. There have been a lot of renovations to it. You'll see what our offerings are. We have the yoga classes. March 1st, we're starting a cohort of 20 total yoga classes where we're using restorative yoga and meditation techniques integrated with David R. Hawkins' philosophy on letting go. So we're going to be learning to become aware of and release emotions that are interconnected with stigma. So this is available to Something Positive for Positive People members at spfpp.org/yoga. Fill out the intake form and then become a member, and you're all good to go. The schedule's not out yet because I'm taking people's schedules into consideration for when we'll record the live classes. And if you can't make the live ones, the recordings will be available to you as well. We've got the conference May 23rd, sponsored by the American Sexual Health Association. Come join us. We have 4 presentations that are going to be on herpes stigma in healthcare, in mental health. We'll speak to some of the symptoms of stigma, and then we'll get into the data analysis of the HSV survey. So join us, tell people about it, get people there. That's really all I got. And check out the events tab for upcoming workshops and events and happenings that are on the table. We are looking for sponsors still for the conference. It's in May, so we've got plenty of time to run a campaign to support our sponsors and thank them for giving us money to do what we're doing through the conference and supporting our efforts. In addition to that, we're seeking sponsors for an upcoming workshop series, 10 workshops. The post is on my page at Courtney Brain _ on Instagram. And I'm looking for people who want to host some of these workshops. Now, I'm not just going to be taking anybody for these. So I'm reaching out to my networking community and seeing who wants to take part in this first. But if you catch a glimpse and you're curious or you want to get involved with that, please don't hesitate to reach out. All right. Till next time.